Well, good morning. Looks like we've got a full agenda and should be another fun day in ED&A. Everybody always snickers.
No, that was a full-on giggle.
All right, Representative McGuire is here, and seeing as it's a little past 9, we will open up the hearing on House Bill 1451 and recognize Representative McGuire to introduce it. Good morning and welcome to Senate ED&A.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Senators. I'm Carol McGuire, representing Merrimack District 27. And House Bill 1451 is a recommendation of the Commission on Pensions that I chaired last year. And what it does is it includes in ordinary pay mandatory overtime. The reason for that is that some employees, notably in the prisons, are working vast amounts of overtime. They're required to work because the prison must maintain a certain staffing level, and if there's not enough people coming in, the workers who are there have to stay over. It's not their choice. And since we reformed the pension system in 2011, overtime is only included at the same percentage it was over your entire career. So that and the amount of mandatory overtime has grown fairly drastically in the last 4 or 5 years. So what this bill does, it simply says that mandatory overtime, as defined by the employer, is counted as base pay for pension purposes. And so that they will not only be paid for the time, it will be included in their pension as base pay. They are already paying toward the pension system on their total pay, including the overtime. So it's just that their pensions will be, more of it will be counted toward their pension.
Thank you, Representative. So just for my own clarification, to make sure I understand, so the current practice is that overtime is not counted toward their calculation. Is that correct?
It is included as a percentage.
Okay.
There are some people who work overtime. We found out that there are some people that work overtime throughout their career and other people who don't. So it, at the same percentage as the rest of their career, is included in their pension. The thing is that if it is not restricted in the last few years, it is easily subject to manipulation. Mm-hmm. And I know of a number of people who very intelligently took advantage of that and managed to boost their pension by 15%.
That was a practice referred to as spiking, correct?
Exactly.
I remember that conversation a few years back.
On the other hand, we've got people that are in the prisons who are working 60 and 80-hour weeks, not of their own choice, and the commission felt that needed to be included as base pay and included in their pension.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. Thanks for coming in and explaining it to us. We appreciate it. Marty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marty Carlin, representing the New Hampshire Retirement System.
Good morning.
Good morning. NHRS doesn't have a position on the bill because it's a policy choice left to the legislature. I think Representative McGuire summed up generally the where this came from with the Retirement Benefit Commission last year, and I could spend far more time than you would need or want explaining the ins and outs of overtime, but at a very high level, among the changes made in 2011, prior to that time, all earnable compensation defined in the statute was just included as base pay. It was the employers reported, you know, one amount of what they paid people, you know, every month to us, and that was what was used as to calculate their average final compensation. The legislation in 2011 created a category of base pay and compensation over base pay, and also pulled detailed payout for Group 2 members who were vested prior to 1/1 of 12, but that's a whole other story. So since then, employers have been reporting base pay, which is defined by the employer, but in sort of common thinking, you know, that's, you know, what's your hourly rate times the number of hours you'd work in a normal week, or your contract salary, or, you know, what band you're in. And then anything else, including overtime, detail for Group 2, stipends, things like that, is compensation over base pay. So we have two entries for each member, and when they come to retire, there's a formula in the statute where we look at the percentage of compensation over base as a percentage of total compensation in the member's high years that are used for the pension versus the percentage in all their career since this data has been reported to us beginning in 2012. And then the law says take the lower percentage. So this plays into the, if somebody didn't work any overtime until their last few years and they had zeros, it's going to reduce the amount you know, that they would get in retirement. So it was a you know, I think an attempt by the legislature to tamp down that sort of end of career, you know, working a lot of stuff. So that's the current landscape. There's been some modifications to the comp over base for Group 2 folks who were in the system prior to these changes. But, you know, generally speaking, that's how it works. This bill would allow employers to designate overtime as mandatory. So there's no definition of what mandatory is. So it's going to be up to the employer, and obviously the employer would need to consent to define that. Certainly, you know, the amounts of overtime worked by state correctional workers has been in the headlines, and there's no dispute that there's a lot going on over there, probably larger than this bill or the retirement system. But this bill, since we don't know how many employers would define overtime as mandatory, whether they would define all overtime as mandatory, because obviously you need to cover the shift, so you could make the case that anytime you need somebody to work more than they're scheduled to, it's, you know, or not, you know, there's a lot of variables. It's a very hard proposal to value actuarially, because you just variables upon variables, so you don't really know until you have some experience a few years down the road how this is going to play out. So for the fiscal note for the House, ED&A, you know, we said it was indeterminable, and you know, it came over from the House. Finance in the House chose not to review it. So we were concerned that, you know, it's indeterminable, but can we give a range to the legislature, because you want to know what you're biting off. So we asked the actuary to look at it with sort of a what's the worst case high end in terms of cost, you know, not worst case for the members, but in terms of a cost impact. If all overtime was designated as mandatory for all employees, police and fire, we assume there was no overtime for teachers already, so that they're not in the equation. So, you know, we sent that over to LBA as sort of here's a high end. This isn't what it's going to be, but this is probably the top bound. And they issued a revised fiscal note this week, which is, you know, indeterminable up to $8 million for the state and $15 million for locals. And it's probably not likely to happen again, because all employers would have to designate all overtime as mandatory. So, you know, on a low end range sort of scale, there was a bill that was killed in the House that would have made all overtime base pay for Group 2 members in Tier B, which is about 1,700 folks that have been the subjects of some other bills, and the unfunded portion of that bill was about $27 million, you know, with a rate increase of under $1 million for the state and about $3 million for political subs, or 2.9 million. So, there's a real range here, and as the retirement system, we don't want to play battleship and give you a bunch of numbers, but we wanted to better define, probably more so for Senate Finance if it moves along, but just for this committee as well, since we did the analysis, what the range is on this. So, and again, it's very hard to value. So, those are the points I wanted to make. The other point would be that if there is a rate impact on this, on the employer contribution rates, that would be shared evenly among employers who designate mandatory overtime and those who do not, because the rates are the same for everyone. So, that's another consideration. So just wanted to speak to that, and I'd be glad to answer any questions anyone would have.
Well, as always, Marty, thank you. We appreciate your guidance on this. Questions from the committee?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, our final speaker is John McAllister from Professional Firefighters. Good morning. Welcome to EDNA.
Good morning, Chairman Pearl.
Turn your mic on, please.
Good morning, Chairman Pearl and the honorable members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you this morning. For the record, my name is John McAllister, and I'm currently the Secretary-Treasurer of the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire, as well as a 25-year member of the Nashville Fire Department. I'm here before you today to speak in favor of House Bill 1451. I'd like to thank Representative McGuire for bringing this legislation forward, as well as the commission that spent the summer, a big portion of their summer, discussing benefits for the retirement system. And out of that commission came this bill, 1451, and they realized that, as we've heard numerous times throughout many of these committees, recruitment and retention in the state of New Hampshire is an issue for police as well as firefighters, correction officers as well. What they realized is that one of the negative effects of recruitment and retention is the mandatory overtime that our members throughout the state are forced to work. That mandatory overtime is overtime that they are not allowed to go home to their families for holidays, birthday parties, whatever that might be, weekends, multiple hours away from their families. And that mandatory overtime is not being calculated within the base rate of pay when it comes to their pension. House Bill 1451 was a bipartisan agreement out of the commission with a lot of support from commission members. You had senators, House representatives, stakeholders that are part of Group 2 and Group 1 pension retirement system, as well as employers that pay in, that have employees that are in Group 1 and Group 2. And they all agreed that this bill would be a significant benefit to our members. House Bill 1451 is important in the aspect of the fact that these members are being requested in order to work these long hours and not getting a benefit in the end. Senator, earlier the mention of spiking had come up. This bill will not bring the spiking back to light, because this is overtime that they do not have the option to work, to say no to. I'll be happy to answer any questions. For many of those reasons, that's why the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire are in support of this bill.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I was reading it the same way, but it's good to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
We have two other folks signed in, Mike Geher from the Police Association and Frank Campo from the Troopers Association signed in favor. Anybody else like to speak before I close the hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 1451. Thank you. All right, I see Rep. Luno is here, so we will open the hearing on House Bill 1292 and recognize Representative Luno. Welcome to Senate EDN. That's Carol's turn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and might I compliment the committee on its very efficient use of scheduling and time. Often, most of the time, House Education is not able to accomplish, to hit those efficiencies.
We don't always hear either, but thank you for the compliment.
So just to take a couple minutes to introduce the bill. Well, for the record, David Luno, serving the people of Merrimack County District 9, which are the towns of Hopkinton and Bow, and as I like to say, representing people all across the state because we all have statewide responsibilities. And indeed, 1292 is a statewide responsibility bill as well. But it came to me actually through a constituent about a year ago. It was after the bill filing period for both the House and the Senate, and our constituent, actually our constituents, they're both retired state employees, and they came in and said, "Hey, I'm having a hard time getting our kid." They're retired state employees, having a hard time getting our kids, who are recent UNH grads. And were employed part-time onto our retiree health insurance plan. And I think their kids, I don't remember, I mean, they're probably like 23, 24, 25-year-olds, but below the 26-year-old threshold. But they graduated, they were no longer full-time students. And so I spent some time looking into it, talked with, actually through some help from Senate Research, got some feedback from Administrative Services, talked with the Commissioner of New Hampshire Insurance Department, and after quite a bit of investigation, it was sort of concluded that maybe this is something that's an oversight in the law but needed to be changed, and so what we're here offering today in House Bill 1292 is a change to the paragraph in the statute that relates to state employee health insurance, retiree health insurance, let me be specific on that, and the eligibility of children between the ages of 19 and 25. And the current statute has the limitation in there that they have to be between 19 and 25. They have to be full-time students, and which is inconsistent with just about every other health insurance plan in the country. So the bill simply removes the condition that they be full-time students. Once they become 26, they're obviously no longer eligible to be on that plan. But just a couple of things. The premiums for these plans are paid for by the retirees at 100%. I was surprised. I was actually talking about this bill with another constituent, and he goes, "Well, Dave, that's going to be meaningful to me at some point as well." A current state employee who will someday down the road be a retiree and will have children that are between college and before the age of 26. So I was surprised that that I ran into somebody that this would also positively impact. So it's a good benefits change. Would come at no cost to the state, at least as far as I can tell. The premiums are paid for by the members. We get young members into the group, and hope to have your support and continuing to recommend ought to pass on this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Representative. Do you have a copy of the fiscal note for the bill with you? I was reading what you were just talking about, that it says that it's, the cost is covered by the retiree. It's just the last sentence that confuses me, and I guess I need a little clarification if you can provide it. If not, perhaps.
Yeah, and
Representative
Representative McGuire might be able to speak to this.
Okay.
I believe Ms. Pittman from Administrative Services did address did address this in the House, and I had to run back to House Education because we're
perhaps
always.
one of them can address it, and hopefully that will, because
Terrific.
expanding eligibility may increase enrollment in claims, potentially increasing costs for the retiree health benefit plan. So if someone can address that, and it would help me to understand better.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Further questions?
Great.
Thank
Thanks
you for
very
coming in. Representative McGuire, you're next up.
Good morning again, Senators. Carol McGuire, Merrimack 27. And this bill went through House eDNA because the employees, basically the retirees pay the cost. It is a self-insured plan, so the amount that that is charged is how much the claims add up to. That line about it increasing costs means the administration cost of enrolling these people and administering their claims. The House eDNA committee was convinced that having more young people in the plan would be advantageous. The only concern I have is that it's a fairly expensive plan, full-featured, but moderately expensive compared to others on the market. And it might be that only dependents who are liable to have higher expenses than most would be enrolled, but you never know, you can't tell. And the price may change relative to other plans in the marketplace at any time. You don't know, but the enrollees do pay the full cost of the claims and administration, and the amount is set every year, I believe. At least it was when I was on the plan.
All right, thank you. Sorry, just making a
Okay.
note there.
Any other
Questions from the committee?
Okay, thank you very
Seeing
much.
none? Thank you. Did you want to testify? Yeah, come on up.
Hello, thank
Good
you.
morning.
My name is Joyce Pittman. I'm the Director of Risk and Benefits from the Department of Administrative Services. And I have to say the testimony that's already been stated is accurate, so I don't want to belabor the time, but I want to answer any questions you may have related to that last line of the fiscal note,
All right.
if you still have any questions.
Well, I think that Representative McGuire answered my question. Is there anything further you'd like to add to her explanation of that?
No, actually, I think she said it quite well. We do calculate the working rate, so she's correct. We still look at that every year. We have a health benefits consultant. We are currently contracted with Siegel as our health benefit consultant, and they assist us with what we call working rates, which looks at the utilization and calculates what that monthly cost would be. And the testimony is correct. 100% of the cost of the dependent is paid by the retiree. Just to give you an idea about the cost that was also referenced. For a non-Medicare retiree, the cost for a dependent to be on that plan is $982.87 per month. So that's not cheap.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Questions from the committee?
You have asked them all, Chair.
I guess I hit a home run with that one. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 1292? All right, seeing none, we will close the hearing. I think we've been so efficient, we have to wait about 4 minutes to start the next one, so we will. I can't exec any House bills right now. Unfortunately, we're on a hold with that until crossover, till we get all of our Senate bills through. So otherwise, I would like to, but it will be coming soon. So we will be in recess until 9:30. All right, being 9:30, we will open the hearing on House Bill 1433 and recognize Representative McGuire to introduce the bill. Good morning and welcome again.
Yes, good morning. Carol McGuire, Merrimack 27, and House eDNA. House Bill 1433 is a result of the new archivist going through their laws and rules and discovered that the Secretary of State does not have statutory authority to accept historical objects, which is kind of surprising because they have been accepting historical objects for, a couple hundred years. But they do not have explicit statutory authority to do so, and that's what this bill does. It gives them the authority to accept such objects, to accept donations for maintenance or store or whatever for these historical objects. And they're creating a fund for document preservation, which is funded by donations only at this point. And so the other thing this bill does, at this request of the Secretary of State, is to upgrade two existing stock clerk positions because of an analysis of what the job requires. These new positions will be going to JCEC for confirmation, but the intent is to upgrade the responsibilities of the people involved. And since they will now have a fund that they're responsible for maintaining and preservation of documents, the archivists convinced us these people needed a bit of an upgrade.
All right, thank you. So I guess my first question that raises, if we're upgrading positions, there isn't any type of funding needed to do that?
The archivist assured us that it could be done with their current budget.
Okay, all right.
Also, it doesn't take effect until the end of the fiscal year, so
It'd be in next year's budget anyway, then,
well,
if it was needed.
yes.
They would come
Yes.
with an updated budget. Okay.
The archivist was confident that it could be covered with existing funding for that fiscal year and subsequently would be in the budget.
Okay. Further questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So, surprise, the Secretary of State's office has been accepting on behalf of the state. And now those donations, is it donations, or are we actively trying to acquire some documents that may be privately held?
As far as I know, this is only for donations.
Okay.
If the Secretary of State wants to buy documents of historical significance, that would be a separate issue.
Okay.
I think they have the authority to buy.
Okay.
But to accept requires statutory authority.
So up until now, when someone has a document or an artifact of historical significance, they would go to the Secretary of State's office and say, hey, I have this thing, and then the Secretary of State's office would accept it and then send it across the street to the library? Or where is this stuff? And
In the state archives.
in the state archives. Okay. So it's all going to be going there anyway. It's just a matter of who accepts it, right?
Yes.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Representative.
Okay. Then if you'll excuse me, my committee's meeting this morning.
All right. Well, thanks for coming over. Ashley Miller and Aaron, do you want to both come? Yeah, okay. Good morning. Welcome to eDNA.
Good morning. Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ashley Miller. I'm the New Hampshire State Archivist under the Office of the Secretary of State.
And I'm Erin Hennessy, Deputy Secretary of State. Good morning, everyone.
I'm here to testify in favor of this bill. The Division of Archives and Records Management has two principal functions. The first, to preserve documentation of the history of New Hampshire state government institutions, making them available to the public. And the second, we also assist state agencies with the efficient and proper management of their records, and in conjunction with that, provide them storage space. In late February 2023, I started as the new state archivist. And since then, I've been working to clean up all of our procedures and policies and any needed statutory changes. This bill formally allows us to accept donations of archival materials and potential monetary donations that may accompany them. And the fiscal note allows us to offer a higher labor grade to two of our entry-level but really critical positions, which the lapse due to our vacancy covers. We recently, within the last several years, received a donation of a desk, for example, in which the legislation that granted us the first in the nation primary was written on, and where all of our presidential primary candidates register their names to the ballot. So things like that come in via donation. I just noticed we weren't formally allowed to do so, and yet divisions like DNCR are, so that's just something I really would love to have buttoned up, especially being in this new position. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Any testimony, Aaron, or you want us to just ask questions?
I do want to offer tours of the archives if you've not been to the archives yet. We have some really interesting things over there, genealogy and historical wise, and Ashley would be happy to give you a tour.
Great. Well, if the committee has interest, we'll reach out there. I know I've been in the archives building myself. My sister works there, but I haven't been through that section of it. Oh, cool. All right, just to make sure that I'm clear on this, so you formally want to be able to accept gifts. Are these gifts typically things like the desk, or are they financial gifts, or is
This would allow us to do both. Sometimes when you receive a large collection of archival materials, that donor will typically donate some money to go along with it to have it either processed more quickly, preserved, hire an intern, for example, to go through it. So I just want to be able to have that ability should the opportunity arise for that.
And you're creating a non-lapsing fund that will be dedicated specifically for that purpose?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Further questions from the committee? Yep, Senator General.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ladies, for being here this morning. Just out of curiosity, what has been the most interesting and most unusual gift you've received so far?
Oh, that is a great question. So I've only been on the job for a year now. I just hit my 1 year at the end of February.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The most interesting gift we've received so far. Oh, I received in the mail from the South Carolina State Archives a letter related to New Hampshire that was written by one of our legislators that they thought would be better, left here rather than in South Carolina.
That's awesome.
And it was related to the start of the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
Wow.
pretty neat one.
Well, thank you. Of course, you'll think of 100 of them once you
Right, I know. I'm like, oh no.
Well, maybe if we do a tour, you can show them.
Yes, if I think of a better one, I'll shoot you an email.
Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you both. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. That's all I have on the list. Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 1433? Seeing none, we will close the hearing. And again, we're very efficient in our time. I don't think I can start the next one until 9:45. Yes, so we've got 5-minute recess, and then we'll bring you up. welcome back. It is being 9:45. We will open the hearing on House Bill 1274, and I will recognize Representative Lynn to introduce the bill. Good morning and welcome to EDNA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Bob Lynn. I'm a state representative from Wyndham, Rockingham District 17. And I've sort of referred to this as the judicial cleanup bill. I introduced the bill basically at the request of the Judicial Council and the judicial branch. And it's designed to accomplish a cleanup of several things, and I'll kind of go through quickly to explain. First, you'll see that on the first page of the bill, it adds the term administrator to the people who comprise the administrative council. And that's because as the court system has, evolved over the years, it used to be that clerks were kind of the primary sort of administrative people, but now we have, as the judicial branch has gotten larger and as there's been more centralization, administrators, particularly in the circuit court, are also playing a very important part in the administration. And to a certain extent, probably less so, but still, there are administrators also with the Superior Court. You'll also see that the number of members of the Administrative Council is increased from 4 to 5. That's just to reflect the fact that the Judicial Branch Administrative Council now has 5 members. Then in Roman numeral 8, you will see that actually it's both in 8 and 9. You will see that the conditions of membership for attorneys are changed a little bit, so that it used to say that all members of the Judicial Council who are attorneys had to be members of the New Hampshire Bar. This changes it to say there still has to be 3 attorneys, but only 2 of them have to be members of the New Hampshire Bar. And I think, candidly, that's because the Judicial Council indicated that, they had some people who were very qualified to serve, who, for example, might be like a retired attorney, let's say from Massachusetts, who might retire to New Hampshire, not have practiced in New Hampshire, but still be very experienced and would be able to provide very good, would be a very good member of the Judicial Council. So that, it seemed to our committee to make sense to do that, and so that was the other thing that we did. With regard to Section 2 of the bill, you'll see that certain language in RSA 594-20A has been removed, and basically the language that was removed was language that made sense when we had the felonies first system, but since felonies first has been repealed, I think we passed that last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago. Anyway, but it's been repealed. That language doesn't make sense, and so that's why we took it out. And then the last in Section 3, I'm sorry, it's not the last. In Section 3, what that is designed to accomplish is the Judicial Council pointed out a problem that this is intended to address. As you may know, there's a hierarchy when somebody can't afford counsel. There's a hierarchy of the way counsel is appointed for an indigent person. First, if the public defender is available, then the public defender is the first choice, and they get, I want to say it's like 85%. I might be off a little bit, but that's roughly where of all the criminal indigent defendants, about 85% goes to the public defender. Then the second tier is there are what are known as contract attorneys. Those are attorneys who have a contract with the judicial branch to provide counsel for indigent persons when the public defender is not available, and they do a certain percentage. And then lastly, there are basically appointed counsel, people that they don't have a contract, but Either the public defenders is not available and the contract attorneys are not available, and so they are sort of a last resort. What the problem that this is designed to address is this: there are a few cases in which, let's say, a defendant is charged with a crime, and the public defender they have a conflict of interest, so they can't represent the defendant. So somebody else is appointed to represent the defendant, either a contract attorney or appointed counsel. And then that person, while the first case is still pending, that person is charged with another crime. And as to the second crime, the public defender is not conflicted. So if under the current statute, what that would mean is this one person would have two lawyers, the public defender and this, appointed counsel or contract counsel. The judicial counsel says that very often that doesn't make sense. It actually could end up costing more money, and on top of that, it doesn't make sense because often there may be reasons why it would be in the defendant's best interest, for example, to work out a global settlement, a global plea agreement, something like that, and it just complicates things with there being two lawyers involved. The Judicial Council tells us that those cases are very few, and that it would make sense to change the law to allow a judge, where the judge found that it was in the interest of justice, to have the contract attorney or the appointed counsel represent the defendant in both those cases to do so. And so that's what Section 3 allows. Because we had a concern, that the Judicial Council said there are going to be very few cases, it won't cost a lot of money. What you'll see in Section 5 of the bill, there is a requirement of a report by October 1 of 2025, just to kind of confirm that. And the legislation is set to, that provision of the statute is set to expire on January 1 of 2026, and the idea is basically to we'll get the report in October, and then both houses of the legislature will have the opportunity to say, well, was it really just a few things, or did it end up costing a lot more than we thought? And if it did, then the legislature would not take any further action, and the statute would die. But if, on the other, if the Judicial Council was right and it did only cost a little bit, then we could reenact the statute, and presumably that's what we would do. And then the last section, Section 4 of the statute, that is just designed to correct really an oversight in last year's budget. Transfer authority for various executive agencies and branches, executive agencies basically, was increased from 75,000 to 100,000, but for some reason we missed the judicial branch, and so that's the change there. Finance didn't have any, at least in the House, didn't have any problem with it. I assume that your finance wouldn't have any issue with it either. It just kind of, it was intended to be done this way, and it just was missed. So, and that's really it. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think, and I hope that this is not really a sort of a controversial bill at all.
Well, thank you, Representative. So, just for make sure that I'm understanding, the new paragraph that's in Section 3 of the bill is sort of a new approach to representing these indigent defendants, and it will sunset on January 1st of 26.
That's right. It was right. Unless we do something, to say that that we want to, reenact it because it's working the way the Judicial Council said it would work.
And we'll have the benefit of that report in 25 to determine what the actual fiscal impact is.
Exactly.
Thank
Exactly.
You. Further questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative, for taking my question.
Sure.
So on the Judicial Council,
Yeah.
In parts 8 and 9,
Yeah.
Are we having struggles recruiting people to be on the Judicial Council who have been practicing members of the New Hampshire bar? That we're now opening it up to,
No, you know what, I think honestly, I'm not sure I could say that. I would say, and I think this is probably, I don't want to single out attorneys because I don't think that would be fair, but the Judicial Council often has a difficulty getting a quorum. I mean, for meetings and stuff like that. I don't mean to suggest that's only attorneys are causing that problem. There are non-attorney members of the Judicial Council, and they sometimes don't show up either. I think candidly, the basis for this request was the Judicial Council or the Judicial Branch, I don't remember exactly who, but somebody in the judicial world thought that there was a particular candidate that was not a member of the New Hampshire bar, but was a very experienced attorney that was now in New Hampshire that would make an excellent person to be considered for the Judicial Council, and that the only thing that was standing in the way is that person was not a member of the New Hampshire bar, and so we talked about it, and I think I would have had a concern if it was if it were just sort of enacting a law for one person. I would have sort of had a concern about that. So we did have a discussion about it, and I know that this is true. There are a lot of attorneys that retire to New Hampshire. We had one in the legislature last year. I think he didn't get reelected, who had been a practicing attorney in Florida for many years, and then retired to New Hampshire, ran for the legislature, got elected. And I think, and I know that there are a number of attorneys that, as to in that circumstance, and many of them, for example, I think we've had a number that have volunteered to provide pro bono work for the Bar Association. They don't want to sort of completely eliminate their relationship with the law, and so they do that kind of thing, and they provide very valuable service. So I think that's the thought behind it.
okay.
Good question.
Yeah.
Follow-up?
Yeah, follow-up, please. So in sections 8 and 9, I think my concern is that creates possibly a not insignificant block of people who would have no connection to the New Hampshire judicial system other than having moved in the state and somehow connected. It seems that that's a large number.
No, I think it would just be
5 members, 3 of whom shall be lawyers.
right. It's eight other members appointed by the governor and council, 3 of whom shall be lawyers, and at least 2 of whom have to be members of the bar. So that means there's only one. It's only one person that we're really talking about that could fit into that category in both 8 and 9. It's just, we're talking about just one person in each of those things.
Okay, and how long is the term?
I think it's 3 years, but I'm not positive on that. I think it's 3 years, and I think you're eligible for reappointment. I'm not, but again, I'm not quite sure how many times you're eligible for reappointment.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, sure.
And just for, and they still have to go through the GNC for approval. They have to be nominated and approved by government council, correct?
I don't think so. I think that there are, I think this is one of the things where everybody, there are various people that get, it's one of those statutes that like various people get to make appointments, like the Supreme Court gets to make appointments, the Bar Association, I'm pretty sure, gets to make appointments, the Senate, the House. For example, I'm on the Judicial Council because I'm chair of the House Judiciary Committee. The statute says that.
Yeah.
I think the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee is also, statutorily appointed. But I think the governor gets an appointment, but I don't think it's governor, and it has to be confirmed by the council. I'm pretty sure it does not.
So I was referring to section 8, 8 other members appointed by the governor and council.
Oh, wait a minute. Well, then I'm sorry. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I was thinking that maybe if the governor's appointment is? No, then I 5 other people appointed. No, I'm sorry, I am wrong on that. I was just thinking that it was just the governor that made the appointment, but I guess that's right.
Thank you.
Because that part that's, that's not in italics, that's just current law. So you're right.
Thank you. Further questions?
One more
Senator
follow-up.
Altshuler.
So I think where I'm struggling with the, having in sections 8 and 9 is that there is a space at the end of each section in section 8, and 5 of whom shall be members of the public who are not lawyers.
Right.
And then in section 9, and 2 of whom shall be members of the public who are not lawyers.
Right.
It would seem like the people who had practiced in other states and are no longer practicing and they are not, they have practiced but are not anymore. Wouldn't they fall into that category?
I don't.
And would be able to use that expertise in that space?
I don't think so, because
No?
you know what I mean. Because if you read, that would be. I don't think you could. That you could read it that way, because if they, and 5 of whom shall be members of the public who are not lawyers, where you've talked earlier about who are lawyers. In other words, 8 members appointed by Governor Cal, 3 of whom shall be lawyers. And then it says, and 2 of those who are lawyers shall be members of the New Hampshire Bar. And then 5 who are not lawyers. It seems to me that would exclude somebody who is a lawyer, whether a member of the New Hampshire Bar or not.
I see. Okay.
Further questions? All right, thank you.
Great.
We
Thank you
appreciate
very
the
much.
testimony.
All right.
Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 1274? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Representative McConkey is here, and being it's after 10, we will open the hearing on House Bill 1140. Recognize Representative McConkey. Welcome to Senate ED&A.
Thank you, Chairman Poe and others, senators. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you to introduce House Bill 1140, relative to the requirements of homeowner installation of septic systems. For the record, I represent the good people of Carroll County 8. I have 8 towns in the Lakes region that I represent. For full disclosure, my professional life is that I'm a septic installer, designer in the state of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and I'm a licensed evaluator in the state of Massachusetts and also in New Hampshire. The bill intention is to clarify when and how a homeowner can install their own septic system. Sounds a little counterintuitive for a guy that makes his living installing septic systems. I come from the area north of here, an hour plus, and being rural, and there are a lot of people that have the capability to actually perform this function. Contractors that have moved here have done this work in other locations. And it keeps going back and forth under what conditions that they can or cannot install their own system. So working with the Department of Environmental Services Subsurface, Mr. Thorburn is going to be here to speak in greater detail about this. I believe we have come to a agreement that will work well. What's been happening in the past is that a homeowner will install a system without full knowledge of materials, practices, and when an inspection, it's a 2-part process. There's a septic design, it gets approved and reviewed by the state. Second part is that the installer or homeowner calls into the department and they come out and inspect the work that was done, what's in the ground. And the department is in many cases having to make repeat inspections until they can get this to a form. So the purpose of this is to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And in the times of glowing economy, developers were stretching the rules, developing a parcel, doing all the work themselves, and then selling it immediately, and then moving on to the next parcel, many times without the proper methods to be doing what they're doing. So this legislation will clarify that, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. I guess the chair has one question. This in no way will prohibit a homeowner from doing their own repair install. It just puts some parameters around to make sure that it kind of follows good practices.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? See none? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanders.
Phil Trowbridge from New Hampshire DES.
Good morning, Chairman Pearl and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Philip Trowbridge. I'm the manager of the Land Resources Program at New Hampshire DES, which includes the Subsurface Systems Bureau. I'd like to start with just a little bit of background. So in New Hampshire, installers of septic systems must be permitted, and that's a license that the department grants. And the reason we do that is because there are a lot of installing a septic system is more difficult than most people would think, and there needs to be an understanding of the regulations and the soil conditions for the system to be effective. However, we do have a provision in statute in 45A36 that allows a homeowner to install a system for their own domicile. Now, the wording of this statute has been confusing to homeowners for years. Strictly speaking, it would only apply to a repair and replacement of an existing system, because you can't have a domicile without an on-site wastewater treatment system. However, this excludes the legitimate cases where someone is building their own house, they're doing all the plumbing, they're doing all of the work, and they're asking, why can't I also install the septic system if I have the equipment and the capabilities? So this bill as amended outlines the two cases where legitimately this can work for someone to install their own system. First is the repair and replacement that I mentioned, and the second is for this construction and of a new house, but we needed to put some guardrails around it to ensure that it was not being abused. So one of those things that we've added is certifications for future residency to ensure that this provision is not used by developers to get around using permitted septic system installers on developments. The other is oversight by a permitted installer or designer, so to ensure that the homeowner does not make a big mistake. And in particular, we're looking for someone to prepare the bottom of the effluent disposal area properly, because that's not something that the department inspects when we come out later. We come out later after the system is installed. It's just not covered, but we can't see underneath all the pipes and stone. So someone has to look at it first at the basal area and make sure that that's working. So those are the two major oversights, or the provisions for better oversight. The department supports this bill because it clarifies a confusing statute and adds important safeguards. And I'm happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you. Senator Altshuler.
Yes, thank you very much. So in the process of, I'm looking at particularly section 3 on lines 14 through 17. Mm-hmm. So if I understand this correctly, I'm building my own home. Mm-hmm. I would like to install my own septic. Mm-hmm. So what this says is that I have to hire a permitted septic designer, right? Which would be someone like Representative McConkey.
Correct.
Who could create a design for me.
Correct.
And then I would have them certify that this was the work I did, so they would come back and take a look at the work I did? Is that how this rolls out? And is there a certificate, like how do I show the state that I followed through in good faith?
So first off, you're absolutely correct that
Okay.
a permitted designer would need to come up with a design.
Got it.
And then the homeowner would install the system according to that design. And then what we provided here is that there's going to be some certification either by that designer or an installer, who could come and verify that the system was installed according to that plan. And we were thinking that we can change our existing forms to allow just a certification or a separate certification form that can be submitted when there's a request for the inspection. So when the department is, called out to inspect the system, we would then say, do we have the certification? And if we do, then we could proceed with the inspection.
Can I follow up? Yeah, so I think I'm missing just a little piece. So I'm doing this myself. I hire a permitted septic designer. I use their design.
Yeah.
So I pay for this design. I use that design, install that bit of it, right? I have to bring that particular designer back to look at the work that I've done. And there will be a form that says, that they say, yep, they followed the design criteria. And I will then use that in a subsequent inspection by the state, because you're saying you can't see under the bottom, get it. If it fails, is the person, I'm worried that the permitted septic designer is somehow going to be roped into a design fail litigation, or if it particularly, if you're on a lakefront property and there are fines because your septic has failed and now you're leaking. Do you see what I'm saying? There's now there's a couple extra people in there. If I did it myself, it's all on me and I have to deal with EPA and the state. If I hired someone to do it, it's on them. Now we're kind of mixing it together. And it seems that wouldn't the permitted septic designer want to be held harmless on construction? Particularly with materials, and I don't know, it seems like that's a big risk for septic designers to want to take on.
No, I understand your question. The septic systems fail for a number of reasons, and we deal with this all the time. Let's just take a case independent of this. The case example you gave of you've hired someone to do the work, and then 5 years later the system fails. You run into that same liability question, but we find it very difficult to determine the cause of failure for a septic system because there's lots of things that can lead to it. Improper chemicals flushed down the toilet can very quickly harm a system. Installing a garbage disposal in your sink when it wasn't designed for that and it overloads the system can cause that problem. So when a system's in failure, it's often impossible to determine. There's only a few cases where I know of, in my experience, where someone has dug up a system and found something really grossly wrong with the construction. In that case, there being liability for the installer. So I come to your question about this homeowner install kind of from that same perspective of when a system fails, it's very hard to assign specific blame to the person who installed it or the person who oversaw it. And in this case, what we're asking the designer to do or the installer to do is to verify a few specific things. First, that the bed bottom was prepared correctly. And then they're not going to be watching the homeowner do everything else, So what they're certifying will be kind of specific to what they actually observed. Was the bed bottom prepared correctly? Did it appear that the system above that was installed, according to the plan? And then that's also, part of our responsibility as a reviewer or inspector is to verify the system was put in the right place, the right elevation, et cetera. So, I think the situation we're talking about here really isn't that different than I think what we deal with all of the septic systems, of there being, multiple people involved, and when a system fails, it being, a case where people will investigate, and if there's an obvious source of the error, then that would be litigated. But in most cases, there's not an obvious cause.
Well, now you've generated a question for me.
I realize I probably should have kept that shorter.
It's okay. I'm reading starting on line 14, number 3. Property owner hires a permitted septic design installer or permitted septic system installer to certify that the waste disposal system, including but not limited to the base of the effluent disposal area, was constructed in accordance with the approved design. Can a homeowner design his own system and get it approved?
No, they cannot.
So we're forcing them then to go to a septic designer
Correct.
In order to get it approved.
Right, and that was a change in the statute last year.
Okay.
So that's a whole separate statute, and that was changed last year. Because we had been dealing, I don't know if this came before this committee or not, but when we gave testimony on that, there's relatively few cases where someone was designing their own system, and the amount of effort to get those systems approved was enormous.
Okay.
And most of them actually never even went forward. So it was a case where we wanted to make that clear that was not possible. That was already passed in his chapter law.
That was the piece I was missing, and that's why I was curious, because the way I was reading it is, why couldn't you just design your own and have it approved?
Yeah.
But if they can't do that, then that answers that question. So that also would answer my other question, is that you would then, DES would then have a site plan on file knowing the location and the specifications of the system.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are my 2 questions, and you got them both.
Excellent.
Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 1140? Representative McConkey, did you have further comments you want to add?
It's all right with you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on the conversation earlier about inspecting. We have had these issues for a number of years. And when I'm contacted by, because the homeowner will have a million questions, what does this plan mean? And in years past, I'm not saying in immediate history, in years past, sometimes reviewers, the field inspectors would actually go out and say, why don't you go get one of these people that's licensed to take a look at this and take it over so this poor homeowner has built something good and they can move forward. So on any of these that I've been asked about, because my family were designers and installers, we insist on going out and seeing the bed bottom, because it has to start right. It's got to be at the right location. It's got to be the right material. And then we say, if we're going to help you with this, then we need to come back before you call for a state inspection. So this mirrors what many installers have been doing, helping homeowners.
Thank you, Representative. Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing on House Bill 1140. Well, I don't think we're going to be execing anything today, as we don't have the full committee here. So we'll probably be done for today. And I will say that we are going to run up against the deadline. We have 2 more weeks that we have to have all bills out of the committee. Are all of you that are here, as far as you know, planning to be in attendance next week?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right. Then what I will do is I'll try to make sure, and I'll talk with Senator Carson too, to try to make sure that she's able to be here. So I'd like to exec at least the 2 Senate bills, and I will check and see if we can do any House bills next week. But If so, I will make the committee aware beforehand so they can be prepared appropriately, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Kevin and Laura, for your great work today. And with that, we are done for the day.